Dad perfect events. The moment I stepped into that courtroom, my daughter Sarah let out this nervous sob. My son-in-law Michael just shook his head like I was some pathetic old fool. But then Judge Timothy Walsh looked up from his papers and went white as a sheet. His gavel actually slipped from his hand as he whispered, "The scalpel." He was staring right at me. My family thought they were putting a confused old man in his place. They had no idea they'd just declared war on someone who'd spent 25 years destroying financial criminals for the Department of Justice. I'm Benjamin Miller, 57 years old, and this is how my own family tried to steal everything I'd worked for. It started at Sunday dinner, like these disasters always do. I was sitting at the far end of Michael and Sarah's dining table in their fancy Los Angeles house. Michael was on his phone as usual, talking loud about his latest startup opportunity. Sarah was going on about some charity event she was planning. They were talking around me like I wasn't even there. The Series B funding is almost locked in, Michael was saying, waving his phone. Just need to bridge the gap for another 60 days. It's a guaranteed 10 times return, maybe 15 times if we hit our targets. I'd heard this song before. Michael Brooks had been singing it for the past 3 years, ever since he married my daughter. Always another round of funding, always another breakthrough just around the corner. I'd already given him $500,000 2 years ago as a wedding gift to help launch his tech company. That money had vanished into operational expenses pretty quick. My grandson Kevin, 14 years old, was the only one who seemed to remember I was alive. "Grandpa, you coming to my basketball game Thursday? We're playing for league championship." Before I could answer, Michael cut in without looking up from his phone. "Kevin, don't bother your grandfather. He's probably got doctor appointments or something." Sarah Brooks giggled. That little laugh cut deeper than any insult. Dads. Always tired these days anyway. Maybe just let him rest. They were deciding for me. Again, making assumptions about what I could or couldn't handle. I said nothing, just kept eating my dinner. I'd been making that mistake for 3 years, staying quiet to keep the peace. After Jennifer, my wife, died 10 years ago, I'd sold our big house in Connecticut. Too many memories, too much space for one person. I bought this guest house property in LA to be close to Sarah and help with Kevin when he was little. The main house sat on my 2-acre lot. I owned everything, including the land under their fancy lifestyle. They had a 99-year lease for $1 per year, something Michael seemed to have forgotten. 3 days later, Michael showed up at my door with an expensive bottle of wine. He never visited unless he wanted something. "Ben, I've got the opportunity of a lifetime here." He started before he was even inside. "The Series B is happening, but there's a regulatory delay. I just need $800,000 to show liquidity to the investors. 6 months tops, and I'll pay you back $1.2 million. That's a 50% return." I watched him sweat through his sales pitch. His startup company, TechFlow Innovations, was supposed to be revolutionizing supply chain management. But I'd spent 25 years following money trails for the Department of Justice, and something about Michael's numbers never added up right. The patterns were all wrong. Too much revenue growth claimed with no corresponding increase in operational complexity. "Michael," I said calmly, "I'm retired. That $800,000 represents a significant portion of my remaining assets." The answer is no. The change was immediate. The fake smile vanished, replaced by cold anger. Unbelievable. After everything we do for you, letting you live here, including you in family events, and you won't help your own daughter's future. I paid for this house, Michael, and the land you're standing on. You're being selfish, Ben. Sarah deserves better than watching her. Father turned into a paranoid old miser. He left angry, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. I stood there thinking about the sweat on his forehead when he'd made his pitch. That wasn't enthusiasm. That was desperation. In my DOJ days, I'd learned to recognize the difference. A week later, I woke up at 2 a.m. with chest pain. Not a heart attack, but angina, stress-related. My cardiologist had warned me about overdoing it. I called the main house. Sarah answered on the 4th ring, annoyed. "Dad, what is it? It's the middle of the night." "Honey, I'm having some chest pain. Nothing serious, but could you drive me to the emergency clinic?" Heavy sigh. "Dad, I have the charity board meeting at 8 a.m. The whole committee is coming here. Just call 911 if it's that bad." Click. She hung up. I called an Uber, spent 4 hours in the ER getting checked out. Stress-induced angina, they said. gave me some medication, and sent me home. Another Uber ride back to my own property, where my own daughter couldn't spare 2 hours to make sure her father was okay. That's when I knew something fundamental had shifted in our family dynamics. 2 weeks later, the envelope arrived. Legal express delivery, thick and official. I recognized the format immediately. I'd seen enough lawsuits in my DOJ days. Petition for emergency conservatorship of Benjamin Miller. I read the first page twice. Michael Brooks and Sarah Brooks were petitioning Los Angeles Superior Court to have me declared mentally incompetent. They claimed I was suffering from early onset dementia and could no longer manage my financial affairs. The medical evidence was a 3-page report from Dr. Anthony Reed, who claimed I exhibited severe cognitive decline, paranoid delusions regarding family members, and an inability to make sound financial decisions. I stared at the name, Dr. Anthony Reed. I'd never heard of him in my life. The timing wasn't coincidental. 2 weeks after refusing Michael's loan request, suddenly I'm mentally incompetent. I pulled out my laptop and did what I'd been trained to do for 25 years. I started following the connections. I didn't knock when I walked over to the main house. I found them by the pool, drinks in hand, relaxed as could be. Sarah was on a lounge chair reading a magazine. Michael was at the outdoor bar mixing another cocktail. I held up the legal papers. "What is this?" Sarah couldn't look me in the eyes, but Michael stepped right up with that salesman confidence. "Ben, we were hoping to discuss this with you first, but after that panic attack last week and the way you've been acting so paranoid about money, we realized you need help. I had angina, Michael, and I'm not paranoid. I'm careful." "That's exactly what someone with dementia would say," he replied, like he was reading from a script. "Look, this Dr. Reed is a specialist. He reviewed your behavior patterns, and the diagnosis is pretty clear. You're not thinking straight anymore." I looked at my daughter. "Sarah, you signed this. You're saying your own father is mentally incompetent." She finally met my eyes, but they were cold. "Dad, it's for your own good. We love you, but you can't take care of yourself anymore. Someone needs to manage your finances before you lose everything." Michael raised his drink in a mock toast. "See you in court, old man. Better find yourself a public defender, because I really don't think you can afford a real lawyer on your Social Security." That was his mistake. That one arrogant comment told me everything I needed to know about what they really thought of me. I walked back to my guest house and locked the door. Then I did something I hadn't done in 10 years. I walked to the back of my bedroom closet and pressed my thumb to a biometric scanner hidden behind my old suits. The door opened to reveal my real office. 3 computer monitors, encrypted satellite communication, FBI-grade forensic accounting software, and files dating back to my Department of Justice career. For 25 years, I hadn't been just any government investigator. I'd been the guy they called when Fortune 500 companies thought they were too smart to get caught. They called me the Scalpel because I could dissect financial fraud with surgical precision. I'd sent dozens of white-collar criminals to federal prison with my spreadsheets and paper trails. I'd testified before congressional committees, taken down billion-dollar Ponzi schemes, and tracked money through offshore accounts that laundered drug cartel profits. I'd retired when Jennifer got sick, choosing family over career. Time to dust off those skills. I picked up my secure phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in years. Rebecca Stone. "Rebecca, it's Benjamin Miller." Pause. "Mr. Miller, my God, I thought you disappeared completely." Dad always wondered what happened to the Scalpel. Rebecca's father had been my partner at DOJ for 15 years. She'd grown up hearing stories about our cases and became a lawyer herself, specializing in white-collar crime and elder abuse cases. "I'm in Los Angeles, Rebecca. I need you here tomorrow with your best investigators. My family just filed for conservatorship, claiming I'm mentally incompetent." I heard her sharp intake of breath. "They're claiming you're incompetent? They have no idea what they've started, do they? None whatsoever. But before you fly out here, I need you to run a background check on someone. Dr. Anthony Reed, supposedly a psychological expert. Give me 4 hours." Rebecca called me back in 3. "Ben, this is almost insulting how easy it was. Anthony Reed isn't a psychologist, psychiatrist, or neurologist. What is he? A dentist. Or was, until the California Dental Board revoked his license 5 years ago for insurance fraud and running an illegal prescription operation out of a strip mall clinic. I felt that familiar satisfaction of pieces falling into place. That's not a random connection, Rebecca. How did Michael find a disgraced dentist willing to commit perjury? That's what took me the extra hour to figure out. When Reed was arrested, he couldn't make his $100,000 bail. A bail bondsman covered him, but they needed a guarantor with assets. Let me guess. TechFlow Innovations, LLC. Michael's company guaranteed Reed's bond 5 years ago. They've owned this guy ever since. The scope of their planning became clear. This wasn't an impulsive reaction to my refusing the loan. Michael had been setting up this contingency for years, keeping a compromised medical professional in his pocket for exactly this moment. He'd been planning to have me declared incompetent long before I'd ever refused to give him money. While Rebecca worked the legal angle from her office, I started my own investigation. TechFlow Innovations was supposed to be this hot startup, but I'd learned over 25 years to follow the money, not the marketing materials. I accessed financial databases I still had clearance for. One, advantage of retiring with commendations rather than being terminated. What I found was a textbook house of cards. TechFlow had never actually developed any proprietary technology. The revolutionary supply chain management software was just a purchase template with Michael's branding slapped on it. The company had no employees beyond Michael and Sarah, no office space beyond a P.O. box, and no revenue streams beyond investor funding. But Michael had been taking money for 3 years, telling each new investor that previous funding rounds were wildly successful. Classic Ponzi scheme mechanics. He'd raised $2.1 million from 8 different angel investors, all believing they were getting in on the next big tech breakthrough. The money had gone straight to maintaining his and Sarah's lifestyle. Lease payments on the house, luxury cars, European vacations, and what he categorized as operational expenses on his fraudulent investor reports. But the worst discovery was still coming. I needed to understand where Michael had gotten the money to fund this elaborate legal attack against me, hiring lawyers, bribing medical experts, filing court documents. None of that comes cheap, especially when you're supposedly broke. I accessed the financial records for the Jennifer Miller Foundation, the charity I'd established in my late wife's memory, with Sarah as managing director. Jennifer had died of cancer, and I'd wanted her legacy to help fund research that might save other families from what we'd gone through. What I found made my blood run cold. Over the past 6 months, Sarah had been writing checks from the foundation. $150,000 to TechFlow Consulting Services, $80,000 to Legal Advocacy Associates, another $75,000 to Medical Review Specialists, LLC. I ran quick searches on these companies. All shell corporations Michael had registered in the past year, with business addresses that traced back to P.O. boxes and virtual offices. They weren't just trying to steal my money. They had already stolen from Jennifer's memory to finance my destruction. I printed every bank statement, every canceled check, every fraudulent invoice. Sarah's signature was clear on every transaction. This wasn't Michael acting alone. This was active conspiracy. The conservatorship hearing was set for the following Monday. Rebecca arrived Sunday night, carrying a briefcase and a tablet loaded with enough evidence to sink a battleship. Ben, I've got to ask, do you want to settle this quietly? I can probably get them to drop the case if you agree not to press criminal charges. I looked at her like she'd suggested I surrender to enemy forces. Rebecca, they stole $305,000 from a cancer research foundation to pay for fake medical testimony against me. They've been running a $2.1 million investor fraud for 3 years. This isn't about family anymore. What is it about? The books need to balance. Monday morning, I walked into that courthouse wearing my best suit, the charcoal gray, one I'd worn to congressional hearings back when I was taking down corporate fraudsters twice Michael's size. Rebecca carried a single briefcase, but I knew what was inside. 25 years of investigative experience had taught me that the best weapons in court aren't dramatic speeches. They're documents that speak for themselves. We sat at the defendant's table and waited. Sarah and Michael were already there with their lawyer, some slick guy in an expensive suit who kept checking his Rolex. They looked confident, relaxed. Michael even winked at me once. When Judge Timothy Walsh entered, I watched his face change the moment he saw me. Tim had been a young federal prosecutor 20 years ago when I'd helped him win the biggest fraud case of his early career, a $500 million healthcare billing scam that had made national headlines. "My God," he whispered into his microphone, forgetting it was on. "The scalpel." Every head in the courtroom turned to look at me. Sarah and Michael looked confused. Their lawyer suddenly looked a lot less confident. "Counselor," Judge Walsh said to Michael's attorney, "do you know who your respondent is?" Benjamin Miller, Your Honor, a retiree claiming financial competence despite clear evidence of cognitive decline." Judge Walsh leaned back in his chair. "That's Benjamin Miller, former lead investigator for the Department of Justice Financial Crimes Unit. The man who testified before the Senate Banking Committee and put half the executives from the Meridian scandal in federal prison. Good luck. You're going to need it." The first witness was Dr. Anthony Reed. He shuffled to the stand looking exactly like what he was, a desperate criminal doing a job for money. Greasy hair, cheap suit that didn't fit right, and the kind of nervous energy that screams, "I shouldn't be here." Michael's lawyer led him through his diagnosis of my supposed dementia. Reed read from his notes about my cognitive decline, my financial paranoia, and my inability to recognize the loving concern of family members. "In your expert opinion, Dr. Reed, is Mr. Miller capable of managing his own financial affairs?" "Absolutely not," Reed said, trying to sound authoritative. "He requires immediate intervention before he causes irreparable harm to himself and his family's financial security." Then Rebecca stood up for cross-examination. She didn't walk to the witness stand immediately. Instead, she moved to the overhead projector and placed a single document on the glass. "Dr. Reed, I'd like to establish your qualifications. What type of medical practice do you currently maintain?" I'm between practices right now, focusing on consultation work." "Between practices? Or is it true that your medical license was permanently revoked by the state of California in 2019? The document on the projector was Reed's disciplinary record from the California Medical Board. Reed's face went white. That's not relevant to my expertise in psychological evaluation, isn't it? Dr. Reed, you were never licensed as a psychologist, were you? In fact, you were a dentist who lost his license for running an illegal prescription mill and billing insurance companies for procedures you never performed." Michael's lawyer jumped up. "Objection! This is character assassination." Judge Walsh looked at the projection screen, then back at Reed. "Overruled. The witness will answer the question." I have extensive experience in behavioral analysis." Rebecca placed another document on the projector. "Dr. Reed, isn't it true that TechFlow Innovations LLC guaranteed your bail bond when you were arrested 5 years ago?" The courtroom went dead silent. Reed looked like he was about to be sick. "And isn't it true that you received $25,000 from TechFlow Innovations 3 days before you signed this fraudulent diagnosis?" Judge Walsh's face turned red. "Dr. Reed, you are under oath. Have you committed perjury in my courtroom?" Reed had no answer. The sound of handcuffs clicking shut echoed through the stunned courtroom as the bailiff arrested him for perjury. Michael's lawyer was completely adrift now. His star witness was in handcuffs, his case was evaporating, and Judge Walsh was looking at him like something he'd scraped off his shoe. Michael was beyond pale. He was a furious, blotchy red, vibrating with rage. He grabbed his lawyer by the sleeve and hissed something in his ear. The lawyer stood up shakily. "Your Honor, my client, Mr. Brooks, would like to testify to clarify these unfortunate misunderstandings." Judge Walsh raised an eyebrow. "After his co-conspirator was just arrested for perjury? By all means, let's hear what Mr. Brooks has to say." Michael took the stand trying to project confidence, but I could see the desperation underneath. He was a drowning man, making bigger and bigger bubbles. "Your Honor, this is all a huge misunderstanding. Mr. Miller, he's been acting increasingly paranoid. He accused me of trying to steal from him when all I did was offer him a legitimate investment opportunity. He's hiding money, making wild accusations against family members who only want to help him." Michael's lawyer asked, "So, your only motivation was concern for his welfare?" "Absolutely. We love him. We just want to protect him from his own poor judgment before he loses everything." Rebecca stood for cross-examination. She walked slowly toward the witness stand, carrying a thick folder. "Mr. Brooks, you testified that my client shows poor financial judgment. Is that correct?" "Yes, completely. He's lost touch with modern investment realities. And this poor judgment was demonstrated when he refused to invest $800,000 in your company, TechFlow Innovations, right? It was a guaranteed return, and he was too paranoid to see the opportunity. I see. And this guaranteed return was based on TechFlow's successful business model? Michael puffed up with fake confidence. Absolutely. We're revolutionizing supply chain. Oat management with proprietary AI algorithms. Rebecca turned to the projection screen. Your Honor, I'd like to submit Exhibits G through M. Financial records showing TechFlow. Innovations has never generated a single dollar of legitimate revenue. The screen filled with bank statements, investor communications, and corporate filings. Michael's face went white as Rebecca methodically displayed his lies. Mr. Brooks, isn't it true that TechFlow is a shell company used to defraud investors of $2.1 million over the past 3 years? That's not how business works. We're in development phase. Development of what? Your company's only asset is a $300 software template purchased from an overseas vendor. There are no employees, no office space, no intellectual property. Michael was speechless. Rebecca wasn't finished. And isn't it true that when my client refused to give you $800,000, you activated this conservatorship plan because federal investigators were closing in on your fraud? Scheme? I don't know what you're talking about. Rebecca placed another document on the projector. SEC enforcement action filed last Friday. TechFlow Innovations is under investigation for securities fraud. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Sarah let out a choked gasp from the gallery. And finally, Mr. Brooks, isn't it true that you and Mrs. Brooks embezzled $305,000 from the Jennifer Miller Foundation to pay for this fraudulent lawsuit? The projection showed the foundation's bank records, with Sarah's signatures clearly visible on checks made out to Michael's shell companies. Each fraudulent transaction was highlighted in red. Michael completely broke down. He stood up in the witness box, his face purple with rage, pointing an accusatory finger at me. He could have prevented all of this. He had the money. All he had to do was write one check and none of this would have happened. He's selfish. He's destroying his own family. Judge Walsh banged his gavel hard. Mr. Brooks, you're confessing to multiple felonies in my courtroom. Bailiff, take this man into custody. As federal marshals led Michael away in handcuffs, Sarah was crying hysterically in the gallery. She looked at me with this mixture of horror, betrayal, and dawning realization. You knew all along, didn't you? You could have stopped this. I stood up slowly, looking at my daughter, this stranger who'd signed her name to steal from her mother's memory. Sarah, I spent 25 years investigating people exactly like Michael. The only thing I didn't know was how willing you were to help him rob your mother's grave. Judge Walsh dismissed the conservatorship case and referred all evidence to the FBI Financial Crimes Unit. I filed criminal complaints for securities fraud, charity embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit perjury. The federal case moved quickly. Michael was indicted on 12 counts of securities fraud, wire fraud, and charity embezzlement. He tried to fight it, hiring expensive lawyers with money he borrowed against Sarah's jewelry, but the evidence was overwhelming. Bank records, investor communications, and his own confession recorded in open court. The jury deliberated for 47 minutes, guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced him to 8 years federal prison, plus $2.1 million in restitution to his defrauded investors. Sarah took a plea deal after Rebecca explained she was facing 15 years as a co-conspirator. She cooperated with the FBI investigation and testified against Michael. The judge gave her 3 years probation and ordered her to repay every penny stolen from Jennifer's foundation, $305,000 plus interest and penalties. He also assigned her 1,500 hours of community service at Sunrise Memory Care Center, working with actual dementia patients. For the next 18 months, my daughter would spend every weekend feeding, bathing, and caring for people who truly couldn't remember their children's faces. I sold the main house and most of the property. Half the proceeds went back into the Jennifer Miller Foundation under professional management by the American Cancer Society. The other half went into an educational trust fund for Kevin, locked until he turns 25. 6 months later, Sarah came to see me before I moved to a smaller place in Arizona. She looked different, hollow, older, wearing the faded blue uniform from the memory care facility. Her hands were rough from honest work for the first time in her adult life. "Why didn't you stop us earlier?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "You could have warned me about Michael years ago." I finished packing the last box of my office equipment. "Sarah, if I'd stopped you, you would have learned nothing. You would have called me a paranoid old man and found another way to get Michael money. You would have kept bleeding your mother's foundation dry, one emergency at a time. So, you let us destroy ourselves." "I let you be who you were," I replied. "And when you crossed the line, when you tried, to have me declared incompetent to steal everything I'd worked for, I simply presented the bill. I handed her an envelope with the address of a small apartment I'd arranged in Burbank. The first 3 months are paid. After that, you're on your own." She took the envelope with shaking hands. "Will you ever forgive me?" "Sarah, forgiveness isn't the issue. Trust is earned back through actions, not words. Maybe someday you'll show me you're capable of that." She left without saying goodbye. I finished packing and called Kevin to say goodbye before my move to Arizona. "Grandpa, I'm sorry about what Mom and Michael did. That was really messed up. Kevin, you remember this. Family loyalty has limits. When someone tries to destroy you financially, they've chosen money over love. Don't ever let anyone convince you that setting boundaries makes you the bad guy. I'm Benjamin Miller, 57 years old. I've retired twice now, once from my career to care for Jennifer, and once from being a doormat. For ungrateful family members, sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let people face the full consequences of their choices. They thought they were putting a weak old man in his place. Instead, they discovered what happens when you declare war on someone who spent 25 years balancing the books for the federal government. My name is Benjamin Miller, and my ledger is finely balanced. I learned that silence should never be mistaken for weakness, and patience without boundaries is just permission to be disrespected. True strength isn't about how loud you can shout. It's about knowing the precise moment to make your move.